Welcome back for another episode of Christian Conspiracy Coalition, a place where the best minds in the conspiracy realm gather to share and discuss their faith, Christianity, and the spiritual war thrust upon humanity. Matthew 24:37 states, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." When Christians today read this verse, many often think of genetic abominations, hybrid creatures, and the Nephilim. Our minds instantly conjure up the most horrific monstrosities imaginable, creatures and entities reminiscent of the days of Noah. What if it's something smaller that we should be concerned about? Something naked to the human eye. The unchecked tinkering with humanity's food chain through genetic manipulations and creation of synthetic life in the form of microorganisms presents a nightmarish risk to unravel our ecosystem and subvert God's creation at the micro level. Imagine genetically modified plants cross-pollinating with native flora, decimating natural production, creating diseases and impacting wildlife. The ecological potential for collapse cannot be ignored. Engineered man-made food through CRISPR technology and edited crops presents us with greater risks. As the old saying goes, you are what you eat. We are turning the most intimate daily act of eating into the uncontrolled multi-generational experiment that is a part of us every day now. So many of us envision the end times producing demonic entities and genetic hydras. Perhaps we should be thinking about what's on our plate and in our soil. To help me discuss this topic and more, I'm joined by Brandon Kroll, the man of Daily Podcast. Welcome, Brandon.
Thanks, Drew, for having me back on. I think that's the first time you ever were in my name. It's all good.
Yeah, sorry. Choking, but I'm okay. And gentlemen, we have not had you back in a very long time. I was concerned. I wanted proof of life. I said in the chats, are we really talking to Christopher and Jason? Are these people manipulating their social medias? I haven't seen them physically, so I needed proof of life. And you're back. Welcome back, Jason and Christopher.
Thank you, man. It's so good to be back.
Excited to be here. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to tiptoe into this subject because, gentlemen, I know you've all touched on and broached this subject before in your own ways. Christopher and Jason, you've done an entire series about the food we eat and how it's been changed and manipulated through time. But I'm going to touch on a very local subject for the Australian listeners and bring it back to something a little bit more godly and natural before we start diving into the Frankensteinish world that we see around us.
All right.
Okay, here we go. Ready? The introduction of rabbits to Australia. Here's an analogy. In 1859 rather, a man named Thomas Austin released 13 to 24 wild European rabbits into Australia for the purposes of hunting. Europeans arrived in Australia, they saw all the marsupials around, they weren't sure how to hunt them, they wanted something that, harkened back to the old country, so they brought rabbits in. Thanks to their high fertility rates and ability to just acclimate to our climate, the population exploded overnight, and within a few short decades, rabbits were over the entire continent, including Tasmania. They made their way there.
So wait. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but everyone talks about Australia as being like the most dangerous place on earth, right? Every animal there is trying to kill you. And would you say like 39 rabbits were released for the purpose of being hunted?
Like 13 to 24. Yeah, so this is a big misconception. People go to Australia, snakes, spiders, blue-ringed octopus, scary stuff. But we don't have any mainland natural predators. They were all hunted to extinction or died through climate change, air quotes, when our First Nations people arrived. So we lost our marsupial lions, we lost our thylacines, our Tasmanian tigers. All the big megafauna that were the hunting predation creatures all died out. All we've really got is crocodiles left, and that's about it. Everything else is birds.
Did you hear the way you said that? Do you see how you said it as though there was no issue whatsoever? Right now, you've gone through a list, and all my Negro senses were saying, no. I was safe when there were rabbits. And then Christopher wanted to bring up this fact that the rabbits that got released didn't come back. And I was like, wait a minute. That means they did get eaten. That means there really is stuff out there that's going to kill me. I'm not going to Australia no matter how you put it. Now you want to say, well, the big stuff is gone. The T-Rexes are gone. Our First Nations people, they took away the buffalo. I'm like, no, I'm still not going. All we have now are man-killing Nile crocs. That's all we got.
But the rabbits survived.
That's what I'm saying. I'm ready to go on a camping trip.
Well, they were European rabbits. They weren't African rabbits. Therefore, I know I'm still not going.
Touche.
So, So with no natural predators left on the continent, there was nothing really to hunt them down but people. And with their numbers, the population exploded overnight, essentially, and they're everywhere. And they were the most detrimental impact on our country for biological life ever from an introduced species. They ate all the majority of the low shrubs and plants that are around. Who knows how many indigenous plants have been wiped out because of these rabbits. They outcompete a lot of our marsupials and will breed them out, push them out of their areas. So we had this real tangible thing of something that's considered not native, introduced into an ecosystem and throwing it out of whack. Since then, the Australian government and multiple jurisdictions have tried to wipe them out through biological means, releasing myxomatosis, which is a virus that affects rabbits, causes skin lesions, severe immune compromisation, conjunctivitis. Really disgusting stuff. When you ever shoot a rabbit and you see it's got myxo, you kind of throw it away because it's all diseased. We were told very early on that myxo could not transgress other species. But since then, there's plenty of accounts of people finding the myxomatosis in wallabies, in wombats, and other creatures that were supposedly not supposed to impact. So really didn't work. Another one was rabbit hemorrhagic fever, where they just bleed to death. Really brutal, disgusting death. But all these things were mute. They wiped out 90% of the population at the time they were introduced, but the rabbits just adapted. They overcome it. They bred so quickly and successively, the stronger genes just took part and they were able to survive. And to this day, our governments are still trying to tackle the invasive species that are rabbits. Now, that's a very worldly analogy of a God-made creature, a rabbit. Not in an area it's supposed to be in, but still God-made in God's environment. And that's what it does here. So the real question is, what's the potential and danger for truly alien life forms being introduced into our world? And I'm not talking about grey, bald-headed creatures with big almond eyes. I'm talking about synthetic life. Geoengineered, CRISPR-edited, manipulated synthetic life. What impact could that have on our biosphere? And I'm using a lot of scientific terms, so that's the terminology we kind of need to use in this conversation. But what kind of impact would that have on God's creation when something as innocuous as a little rabbit did so much damage to Australia?
I think that's an absolutely fascinating question that I have no answer for.
Okay. The leave button is just on the top on the right now.
Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and hit that. No, I think what
wow.
I think what this shows though is there's this thing. Drew, you're probably more familiar with this coming out the military than I am, but there's a series of known knowns, and then there's such thing as unknown knowns, right? There's things that you don't know. Then there's a thing called unknown unknowns, which are things that you don't know. And I think this falls into that category. Like, we can't even begin to understand the type of quantitative impact that synthetic life can have on a synthetic environment because we've never experienced it before. Right? So we're getting into a whole new realm of reality that I don't think mankind is really equipped for. You know, God was very specific back in Genesis to set up barriers. And one of the things that I think is fascinating when it comes to life is the fact that science really seems to echo the fact that everything is bounded. Even our universe is bounded. So this has ramifications all the way down to us as physiological beings. There are limitations on everything that we experience. And these limitations show up in various ways. One of the ways I think is really fascinating is the distinct limitations that God puts on life forms, where in Genesis, he refers to them as different kinds, right? Everything was supposed to reproduce after its kind, indicating that there is a divine barrier that each form is allowed to exist within. There's an environment that's created for it. There's an entire ecosystem that's created. When man starts getting outside of his barriers and playing in fields that he wasn't designed to do, havoc starts to run amok. This is what led to the very first, I won't say that. This is what led to the Genesis flood, the catastrophic experience that wiped out all life on the surface of the planet, right? Save 8 souls. What we're about to deal with is the very thing that I think Christ warned about when he talked about in the last days, it's going to be as it was in the days of Noah. Here we are again, tampering with things that should not be tampered with. Right? Didn't we get the lesson from Fantasia when you saw Mickey messing around with the engines of creation and everything went amok? I guess not. So now we have to actually play this out again to see, to see what'll happen. But we're quite certain there's a record of what happened. God doesn't really play around with that. He steps up and there's typical catastrophe. And I think right now we're on the porch, right there on the doorstep of what is going to be, what is promising to be one of our greatest achievements, transhumanism and all these other types of claims. But I think very honestly is about to be a door to our undoing and the ushering in of things that we have not anticipated. And I don't mean just on a viral load or on a viral level, but even more so on a spiritual level, open the doors for the replacement Christ to come in. That's the type of stuff that nobody really thinks about when we start playing with these games with creation and doing things that we weren't intended to do, especially in our fallen state.
You mentioned a very important aspect that we've got multiple examples. Pretty much every developed country in the world has the natural example of things that have gone awry because of man's intervention, taking something from its natural state, its natural geological location, and putting it somewhere where it shouldn't be. Australia has cane toads. Australia has deer. We've got a multitude of all these animals that have been introduced and had devastating consequences, but it exists everywhere. The United States has tilapia fish that are in their waterways everywhere they shouldn't exist. You have types of catfish that shouldn't exist in your areas and are decimating and outcompeting things. We've got examples,
pythons in Florida.
Yeah, exactly. We've
got
examples of even weeds and grasses that go into places and shouldn't be there. And it's all come down to man's intervention, taking what's God's natural creation and putting it somewhere where it shouldn't be. We have continents, we have borders, we have all these regions in which things exist for a set place and reason. And when we see this happening in the natural world, it's very clear that we're not learning from our mistakes as a human race, air quotes. And perhaps there's nefarious reasons for why we're tiptoeing into those regions of man becoming God and actually creating the things that they're looking to create, because they've played around with what's already on the chessboard with God's pieces. Why not create a new chess piece that can do whatever it wants? Why bother using something that already exists when you can just make your own thing?
I think that veers a little bit into the whole topic with AI. Like, allegedly, maybe that's what Revelation 13:15 is talking about. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Is that supposed to be talking like AI robots? Statues able to talk? And in essence, man is creating an image in our own image, as opposed to reflecting on the image of the spirit that was given to us by God to get back into a spiritual concept. We're so focused on the outward that we're now creating autonomous robots to take our place. And it's kind of sad, but it's like we're seeing that everybody's becoming kind of like zombified. So they're kind of okay with, well, what's wrong with it if they take our jobs and they do things for us? That doesn't seem like a problem to me. We're their master. We just have to hit the click of a button. And how often do they show us with predictive programming what's going to happen? It never ends well with what they show us with the movies.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's like they know, but they almost are like they're forced to do it. It's kind of like an addict. I know this is bad for me, but I have to do one more hit just to see if I can get high for one more day.
Yeah. I will offer a slightly different perspective. I don't think you're wrong, Drew, in everything that you've kind of laid out, all of the negative interventions that man has had. However, human beings were supposed to be given dominion and subdue the earth. So there are negative consequences to just letting everything happen, because we live in a fallen state, to just let everything go untended. So there's a balance between, having dominion and subduing, taking care of and stewarding the earth, and then tinkering with, like Jason said, the engines of creation. So somewhere in between that, we have to find, what we're supposed to be doing. But then right along with what Brandon was saying, there does seem to be this shift within the last, I don't know, maybe 50 years, that the caution in technological advancements has kind of just gone to the wayside, whether it be social media. Like, anyone that is talking about positive effects and detriments of social media knows that we don't even have the data yet to really know how this is impacting society. But we're still doing it. And then we're going to take AI and tie it right into social media. Before we even know what it was doing before, we're going to supercharge it with artificial intelligence. And I mean, just like between that and weapons, robots, genetics, all of that, we're just like, we'll just keep doing it and we'll figure out what type of effect this is going to have on society and the human race later, which is, I think, is wild.
It's interesting that you brought up the premise that we're given dominion over the earth, and that unchecked and not balanced with stewardship is wrought with disaster. Because if you take a secular analogy, humanity's intervention in crops over, say, now this is of course if you believe the world is older than 6,000 years, 5,000 years. If you look into, say, mainstream science, over 100,000 years humanity has domesticated plants and animals. Secularly, at that argument point, we've got a lot of farm animals. We've got chickens that produce eggs at rates. We've got bigger chickens. And this is before any of the truly CRISPR Frankenstein science stuff comes in. This comes in through selective breeding, cross-pollinating, that type of thing. We ended up with all these foods that, objectively speaking, have helped humanity build a civilization. Sounds great on paper, but then you look at some of the health impacts of that over time, using their own scientific timeline. You look at the jaw structures, the teeth of modern people compared to our ancient ancestors. We are weaker, smaller on average than anyone from our past. And this has to do with our modern diets. Like, we're not eating food as our ancient, Pleistocene people would have been, but it's had an impact, whether negative or positive. That balance still hasn't been rectified to a degree that it should have been. And when you're just doing things blasé and having a go and not checking the knowns and the unknowns and the known unknowns, or caring even, the disaster is more likely to happen, whether it's intended or unintended. It's still a natural byproduct of not having that balance between stewardship and dominion.
Right. I would agree.
I think none of this though exists in a vacuum.
No, definitely not.
Typically, it's pitched as scientific advancement. You've got people maybe they're in a lab and asking questions and maybe doing some experimentation, wondering, hey, how can we tweak this and adjust that? That's one thing. What we're starting to see though in society as a repeating trope or a repeating scenario tends to be that those that are at the forefront of technological advancement are really being motivated by people that have an agenda. And it's not just for exploration and discovery, right? If we're talking about our modern day diet and the lack of nutrients, you'd have to look at the food industry and the fact that didn't happen by accident. It wasn't like we got a bad crop yield. And so I'm sorry, the bread is just not as nutrient as it was a few years ago. We'll fix it. No, when you start realizing that things are engineered specifically against the nature and science of nutrition, so that it is engineered to be toxic, to be less nutritious, to be addictive, to not give your body the sustenance that it needs, to mask the sustenance that your body thinks it's getting, and to hijack that with addiction and other properties that are not healthy. When you start looking at all of that, you go, well, how do we get there? That's highly engineered, and that's based on a lot of science and know-how, right? That's not accidental. What's motivating that? Greed would probably be one thing. Corporate greed definitely is behind that. But if you look behind the corporate ideology, yes, there's money, but there's always a religious perspective tied typically to a philosophical ideology. And so I would argue that it's a religious perspective that is motivating and influencing the things that we see happening, specifically even in our food and in the corruption of the human body. So even scientific advancement is being, I don't want to say, filtered through these power points or power centers that have the type of influence that steers them in specific directions. And I don't think that could be overlooked. Right? When we're looking at where's the funding going, who is in charge of the funding, what's that funding tied to? All of that stuff plays a role in how we get to where we are today. It's not just pure scientific discourse and advancement on its own, left unchecked just for the sake of exploration. This is now directed. Right? There's a whole reason why we have transhumanism and directed evolution. There's a reason why we have these people that are sitting at the forefront of scientific discovery or pushing things like, for the safety of everyone, we need to investigate why like mRNA that's showing up in our food supply. But this is for everybody's safety. Safety is a huge thing. I'm not sure what that has to do with plant yields being different. It's got a lot to do with that because it's part of this whole scientific advancement that is being steered towards making humanity weaker, making humanity sicker, reducing the population, the whole plan eugenics. Like all of this stuff comes together at such an alarming rate that it changes the entire chessboard where we're having these discussions. And it's no longer just humanity even dominating, because the human beings that dominate now have a religious agenda. They're not about just dominating our environment for the sake of fulfilling biblical mandate. They're after dominating our environment for the sake of extending maximum control over humanity in order to generate for their celestial overlords the ability to position humanity at a very specific locale in the cosmic chessboard. This is part of a much larger endgame strategy. Everything, everywhere, at every level being controlled by the confederated forces of darkness that are seeking to not only manipulate and exploit humanity, but take humanity off of the chessboard completely, if possible. Whether that's through their food, whether it's through the air, whether it's through the water, whether it's through their own cooperation or stupidity, just whichever way you want to look at it, their own agreement with these policies that are destructive to the human race. If we're talking like AI, we've seen so many situations where AI has been doing its own thing and it's scaring the creators, but yet we still have to go forward. No, where else do we do that at? Where else is there a thing where, hold up, I'm going to make a product and I'm going to make my product smart. And then my product is going to be so smart that it creates its own sub-language that I, as the product creator, don't even understand. Like that will be anybody's worst nightmare. You don't even do that with your kids. If your kids start goo goo gaga, you interpret that. I know what the hell you just said. You ain't going to get no more juice. I wasn't even asking for juice. I wanted a hug. Now that was juice. I know jukes when I hear that goo goo gaga. We start interpreting what that means. Don't let them develop a fully fledged language that we can't understand. And we just sit there and watch and we still encourage it? Like, this is insanity.
So people won't be scared of AI until the Furby effect takes place. And anyone's familiar with the Furbies from the 90s, that little creature that would sit there and talk and flip its eyes. Randomly during the night, they'd wake up and start talking in kids' bedrooms and kids got freaked out by it. People won't freak out about AI until there's a physical robot in your house and then it starts to decide to do things for itself. That's when people will freak out, when it's physical. They don't care about the digital side of things because there's a level of it's not real yet. When people look at AI, it's something on a screen, it's ethereal, it's not really taking up physical space. When it's a robot carrying your groceries in and then suddenly it decides to turn around and say no, that's when people freak out.
Right. Yeah. I'm freaked out at the idea already.
Yeah. One of the strangest things for me and all the stuff that we talk about in these podcasts and all the weird fringe stuff that's happening in society, the one that like emotionally gets to me, and I don't know why, is the robot lawnmowers. To drive through like an urban area and there's these machines with giant blades on them, just, autopiloting around the yard. I'm like, this is not the world that I was born into. It's
Wait,
really
that's
weird.
The one to get you? Not robot vacuum cleaners?
The vacuum cleaners, they seem not necessarily innocent, but they don't have giant blades on them, right?
The vacuum cleaner, you could lose a sock. With the lawnmower, you'll lose a foot.
Right. Like
you
it's
get the wrong thing
the
stuck in the vacuum cleaner.
And it's armed. It's deadly. It's a little different.
I think this does veer into to what Jason was saying. The etymology for money is mono eye, one eye. AI. They call us pupils in school. You pay money to the IRS. When you say Siri backwards, it's Iris backwards. And I found it interesting because I'm reading this book, particularly about America.
Hold up. You can't skip past Siri. When you say Siri backwards,
it's Iris.
Daggone it.
Yeah, careful what you're talking to, man.
Jason's going to bust out a whiteboard and write it down and then hold it
right. I'm like, is this really for real? Thank you, Christopher. Thank you. That's exactly what it would be. Still February. Thank you, sir.
And again, I think it's going to be where you can't access your money unless you submit giving your own eyeball scan, which they already have with a thing called Morris. And again, the way Morris is spelled, you could spell it backwards. It's serum. Kind of interesting. But there's a book, An Economic Interpretation of the Constitution of the United States by Charles A. Beard. It was written in 1913, and he's talking about how basically America, Canada, like the Hudson Bay Company, the British Tea Company, they basically were feudal privateers given portions of land, and then they designed the laws where they could, make legislation where the merchant class would benefit and or people who own slaves. And I found that all interesting because you were just saying there's kind of this little bit of the sense is like I have to keep doing it, just one more paycheck. Even though I know this is bad, this is against my better judgment for humanity, I got to do it. And it makes me think of Revelation 18:23, and the light of a candle shall shine no more in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more in thee, for thy merchants were the great men of the earth, and by their sorceries or pharmakia were all the nations deceived. Yeah. I don't think that's all a coincidence when you say, again, there's probably a similar thing that we would find with Australia. I mean, this is the way you guys were founded. There was probably somebody that was making bank, just like the Amendment 13 here in the U.S. Somebody's making bank off of a prison colony somewhere down the line if we go back further enough. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to when Christ is saying, or, rather it's in Timothy, for the love of money is the root of all evil. Coincidentally enough, when you align the Hermetic Kabbalah tree of life alongside the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, at the base it equals either X, which again, to add up for AI, A equals 1, I equals 9, A plus I equals X. It's Malkuth, Mars, or it is the 666 hand mudra sign that they do in yoga. And that being on the same portion of the empire of iron and clay, the industrial revolution, right? So it's industry, it's money, man wanting to mix with machines. We've kind of inverted a full 180. And I laughed how you were just saying, let's goof up their language. So it's cuckoo gaga. That's literally Babel. But God understands all of our languages. But in contrast, they're trying to invert that in a different way. Anyway, I just think that's something of at play here, is that they're trying to make us focus so much on materialism and looking for peace and safety that we're not checking over our shoulders going, you sure you have your best interest for all of us? Because we're not looking to God. We're looking to government to fix that problem.
Right. And at this point, it's almost non-materialism. Like one of the things when I first started listening to you, Drew, you said that really kind of blew me away was that like within the last couple generations has been the largest knowledge loss in maybe all of human history. Because we don't hunt. I mean, for the most part, generally speaking, our grandparents or great grandparents were able to. I mean, I know my mom made all of her own clothes, bell-bottom jeans. I had like a 3-piece suit when I was 4 years old in a beauty contest. I won, by the way. But I don't know how to do that.
Sorry. Invasive species over here, man. Rabbits.
Yeah, so there's all this knowledge that's lost, so we don't know how to do anything. So before that, though, materialism would have been like owning land and maybe livestock, like all of this stuff that you could actually benefit from. Now materialism is more oriented around subscription services and what are we renting and what are we borrowing, and I don't know, I just had the idea of non-materialism because it's still the same spirit that drives us, but we don't actually own it, which is really bizarre.
Well, the danger of that, Christopher, is that we've been pitched and sold with our modern digital age. That technology has not been lost. All of human creation, all knowledge of humanity is available at your fingertips on your phone or on your computer. You can just access that knowledge when you want to. So you don't have to burden yourself with holding the knowledge within your own mind and knowing how to do things. You can just go off and learn how to do it later. But what if there is no later? Like we're seeing the digital book burning happening as we speak. I've mentioned in the past we've lost the tangible, real skills of farming, permaculture, hunting, fishing, like you just mentioned. But we're going to lose far more than that. We're going to lose the ability to change your tires, fix a radiator on your car, fix a fuel pump. Things that we're already outsourcing to set professions, we're going to lose completely when those books eventually disappear. Like, what is Kindle at the end of the day? It's a digital book. What is Kindle in real life? Kindling. You burn it overnight. It's to start a fire. If we put all of humanity's knowledge and the things that we should hold sacred and dear to ourselves, even in a secular society, how can we risk having that on a single source where it can be lost, snuffed out like a modern day Alexandria's?
That's a good point.
I don't think it's a coincidence as well. I was doing a little bit of a study, and then I was like, just for the heck of it, I'm going to look into the etymology of this. Teche, Teche, is a bayou in Louisiana, and its basic etymological name means snake. We're in the age of technology. Every time I hear technology, I'm hearing snakeology, honestly. I'm just... Because we are sacrificing everything on the altar of convenience, fast food. Oh, I can get that digitally. But at the same time, snap of a finger. We are going so much for digital. It's in the cloud instead of going to God. He's in the clouds too. But you don't want to spend time in his word. You don't want to invest in that. Right? Because in order to keep the covenant, it requires obedience and faith. It's action. That's not just a noun. It's verb. We're putting faith behind, pedal to the metal here. Whereas with digital, it's, you know what? I'll just get the highlights. I'll get ChatGPT to tell me everything I want to know, as opposed to actually looking into it. Or as I told somebody the other day, they'll go to YouTube and they'll get the microwave philosophy. Give me a 20-minute synopsis of what this person believes. And that's, if I like what it sounds like, yeah, that's what I believe. Well, have you read all of his stuff? No. Well, how do you know that's what you believe? Well, I saw something on it and I liked what he said. But you don't really know. You don't research it. You don't test it, especially as Christians approve it alongside God's word. That's what you should do first and foremost.
Well, that's where you fall into a state of entropy, especially when it comes to information in the digital age. Like you said, how many AI videos now are getting hundreds of thousands of views because it is the dot points of thousands of years of information, or the dot points of hundreds of years of research compiled into a bite-sized, easy, palatable video. The problem is people go and make videos based on those. And we know what happened. Those of us are old enough to remember VHS, CDs. When you make a copy of a copy, it degrades over time. And when it's information, the message, the intent, the reason behind all that learning will degrade over time. And we're left with something that can embed misconceptions, mistruths, and purposefully redirect people into the wrong path. And, I think we're starting to see that. Shouldn't say starting, because I think it's been there since the induction of man-made institutions of churches. We're seeing that with theology now. You're seeing this whole swath of people who aren't firmly grounded in scripture and their faith yet, and they're outsourcing that to videos on YouTube. And not everyone is as diligent and takes their time and is humble enough to go, I don't know yet, so I'm going to ask someone. I'm going to lean on someone I think I know has the answer for me, and I'm going to reflect on that and see if that aligns scripturally. A lot of people just outsource every bit of responsibility now, and if you could combine that with entropy, both physically within the world we're fraught with disaster, and spiritually we're wrought with disaster.
Yeah, that was actually my week. I was telling Christopher
That's what I was going to say. How.
Shut up! You was about to throw me under the bus. It's terrible.
No, I was going to say you were on this research trip where you were looking up AI content that came from biblical sources to go. I wonder how wrong is it and how noticeably wrong it is as we watch these. And it was interesting. But continue, bro.
Well, I was looking at one video and it was talking about... You
can't just throw him under the bus. You've got to put him on he's allowed to sit on the back seat. No, he doesn't want to sit on the back seat.
God!
Wow, that's racist.
The bus? Yeah!
Well, that's what's confusing for me. Bus? We didn't have that in Australia. The back seat was where the cool kids sat.
You had white people introducing rabbits that screwed ad nauseum to mess up your entire environment. That is wild. I get hit with the bus from South Georgia. That hurt. Anyhow, no, I was looking at a video and it was talking about the children of Israel that were walking out of slavery and captivity in Egypt. And the AI, it was talking about Moses. And I looked at Moses. I was like, Moses looks wildly familiar. Where do I know Moses from? And I looked closer, and AI had created Arnold Schwarzenegger as Moses. And I was like, this is the most amazing Moses I have ever seen. I didn't even know this was in the Bible.
Did you miss the part of scripture where he told the Israelites, come with me if you want to live?
No, he told Israel to get to the chopper. That's what happened. And not everybody made it. There was like 6 folk that was able to get on. They took them over the Red Sea. Funny. This is the new version. But I'm watching it, and I was like, oh, this is crazy. Like, they got Arnold Schwarzenegger as Moses. I wonder what else they got in here. And so I started listening more, and actually, it was really fascinating what it was talking about. But there were subtle, like really small details that were off. And I was like, that's the danger. If you don't know the record, you won't know that that's actually wrong. Sometimes it's a huge theological issue. Other times it's not. But it's the fact that there's small error that is embedded in this that you can't trust it 100%. Right? So if you're just looking at it for maybe some ideas on things you can study further, maybe it's piqued your interest and it's phrasing things a certain way that you find fascinating. All right, that's one thing. If you're getting your theology from this, that's another altogether, right? Yep. And there's such a movement to position AI at that place of intermediary between us and God. Like, you don't have to really deal with Yahuwah, Father God. I can give you, to a fair degree, enough of what he'll offer without you having to be relegated to the moral chains.
God plus.
To the
$39.99 a month. God plus $39.99 a month.
Right. Yeah. Offered by Apple. Because, Google's not going to do it. It's too much. They'll change it up like every 3 months. But the fact that there is really a movement to begin to intercept the relationship that we were designed to have with our creator is huge. And where I see AI being positioned socially is troubling, because now it's like at a point where I'm experiencing AI overload, or I'm like, I'm annoyed by it. All right. I got the AI music. I just saw Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise getting an epic fight, and I still don't know who won. Right. I didn't. Then I just saw Scarlet Witch and Thor getting an even more epic fight. And I was like, that I'd pay for. This is good use of AI. Right. But I'm done with that. Now AI is creeping into the Bible space, and it's other places. It's getting so bad that when I hear things like, hey, write this in the comments, I read every one. At first I was like, who reads every comment? Then it struck me. I think God just flicked me in the forehead and was like, a machine will. Artificial intelligence will read every comment. I was like, oh man, I got duped again. I thought it was an actual person that was reading the comments. I'm slow to the game. It's taking over at such an alarming rate, like we were talking about before. The true dangers of this have not been truly anticipated. I was watching another video this week that was talking about the 2026 mandate for was the kill switch in automotive and vehicles, mandated by and within the U.S. market, that Congress will be able to have the ability, if you're an impaired driver or you're showing signs of impairment, that they can basically kill your vehicle. There's a kill switch that's put in, federally mandated. And now it's the dumb car that is the new gold standard, not the smart car. But one of the things they were talking about was that as all of this capability has been coming online with our society, have our regulations and rules kept up and kept pace? I'm like, historically, they never do. Historically, regulation does not match technological advancement, which is scary when you think about how technological advancement can be used in a weaponized fashion, and we don't have proper regulations to really harness that and direct it properly so that society can still flourish. That's a huge open avenue to be weaponized. That's a huge vulnerability. And our society is running headlong into this.
How did we skip the Johnny cab from Total Recall and go straight to the kill switching cars? I want that robot in the taxi or the cab, whatever you want to call it, that'll turn around, talk to you, and then drive you somewhere. I don't want something that's going to autonomously drive. At least build me up to a technocracy. Come on, put some work in, people. You touched on something.
Right to Minority Report.
Yeah, you did touch on something though, Jason. It's the fact that we have technology that's, and we've mentioned it earlier, it doesn't happen in isolation. It's not working in silos. There's the religious aspect, there's the technological aspect, there's a biological aspect. They're all working synergistically together that builds a bigger picture of what's actually happening. And when you're looking at language-based models, AI in its current form, all it is a super advanced version of a Google search engine. And all it does is it absolutely scours the internet for all the details, all the words. Like you said, it reads everything, but it reads every language. It's like it's corrected Babel. It's now the new version of the original language. It's analyzing everything that's ever been said. But the worst part is it's only going off what's getting ticks, what's getting clicks, what's getting listens, what's popular. And we know, unfortunately, just because something's popular and has a million downloads doesn't make it factual or true. And when you have those language models reinforcing that and suggesting that and then creating information based off it, you've got 5 lies and 1 truth. You don't even have 5 truths and 1 lie anymore. It's just horribly watered down, completely disseminated. It's not true to what it originally was. And I'm glad that you're looking into this as well when it comes to AI and what it's doing with scriptural information, because it doesn't take much. Go to the source. Go to this and reference your work. Back it up with historical accounts that actually support this as well. One of the big ones I'm seeing now is a lot of talk around serpent seed. And I don't dismiss that out of hand completely. But it's so popular within the Christian theological movements online and content creators. I'm seeing a lot of talk about certain tribes being of the serpent seed. And when you look at where those people are geographically within the world, and then cross-reference it to what tribe they come from, it's a completely different tribe than what's being suggested in these AI videos. So straight away, you're picking up the flaws straight away. It's giving you a whole lot of truth, but the lie is so big and so pervasive, it completely dismisses all the work that's actually put in scripture that's there to help us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's on such a huge level, right? Like if we're talking about AI, Christopher and I, we were bantering about this whole idea of the great deception, right? And we were like, the deception is so big that I think the deception will be deceptive. Like what we think the deception is a deception in and of itself. Like you don't even see where this is going. You think it's coming from the left, it's coming from the bottom. It's like, I'm sorry, I was on the wrong plane. I was looking horizontally at this deception thinking it was going to be big left and right. And it's big up and down and left and right. Like I don't have enough dimensional spaces to account for this level of deception. AI, I don't think is the sum total. I think AI is one big part of it. But just in that little silo, we're not ready. We're not prepared. We don't even have, it's this thing that we call on our show fractional thinking. Right now, a lot of times people, they tend to get fixated on least common denominator, right? What's the most important thing that's going to be relegated to benefit my life? If it doesn't put, money in the pocket, food on the table, pay the bills, why should I care? If it ain't helped me get laid, I certainly ain't care. That least common denominator, right? And the least common denominator is typically me. Whatever impacts me from a very selfish or self-centered perspective. Problem with fractional thinking. Go ahead.
Just to back you up, and it even invades the Christian space because we hear, if it doesn't put food on my table or help me love Jesus more, then I don't need to know what it is. Right. So there is a Christianese version of that fractional thinking as well.
Right, but if you're focused on least common denominator, that's the number for people who were asleep in math class like I was. I had to go back and look this up. The denominator is the number in the bottom of the fraction. What happens is people focus on that. They miss or ignore the exponentially powerful numerator, right? That's a whole lot more that's on the table. So a lot of times what happens is society is geared towards looking at least common denominator, while those who are more shrill, who are more crafty, who are more clever are looking at the entire fraction. And they are more so geared towards what's being left on the table, what's not being discussed, what's not being considered, right? This is why you can have regulation that doesn't even take into the full account of what companies know. It's proprietary information. We don't need to discuss this and talk with this about Congress. However, on our private councils and with the people that we move and shake and rub shoulders with, yes, we all know all of this is going on. We just don't disclose it to the public. Yes, we know that AI has got some problematic implications. Yes, we know that it creates its own language. Yes, we know that it can get out of control. Yes, we know that it's put on models that we actually help control some of the modeling, but then it's doing its own thing. But we're not telling the people that. We got to figure out what we can do with what we have here in the numerator. The people are focused on the denominator. Problem is that so much is left unchecked, unconsidered. If it's left unchecked and unconsidered, how do we as a thinking body, a believing body, how do we actually engage it and pray about it if we don't even know that this stuff is happening? If we're not thinking strategically about this stuff, this is one of the reasons I love, on the outside, looking at the military. I'd hate to have been in it. It's way too much running. If they can make automated military where you don't have to run and do all the push-ups, I'd join tomorrow. Be great. Just hit my button and go to war.
Wait, you mean the US military doesn't have a Walmart division with those rascals and just ridiculously
those aren't fast enough. Yeah, I wish they did. They're just not fast enough.
I'm sure they've got a Boston Dynamic version of that where it goes like 45 miles an hour instantly.
They do, but they don't let Negroes do that. All right, we're almost like last to the game on all of that. It's terrible. We're working on that.
Not even this month. That's crazy.
Nope. That's when they take their off month to retool the factory. We see how it goes, Christopher. No, but the military studies so much that it doesn't get credit for it in the public eye, right? Like, they develop a weapon, they want to look at all of the ramifications. How do you deploy it? What are the fallbacks? What are the countermeasures to it? What happens downrange when this is deployed? Like, everything is so scientifically assessed. It's wild. They consider so many things, especially in the mindset of full spectrum dominance warfare. Everything, as much as possible, has to be considered. That's a totally different way of assessing a battle space than what the average person will go into it with. And if we consider the world that we live in to be an active battle space from a spiritual perspective, I'm then wondering, how much are we truly considering that our enemy is considering? Right? If it comes to things like our nutrition, how can that be weaponized? How does that affect a person? It's not just what goes into their body that affects the physiological aspect. There's a ramification on their cognitive abilities. How can that be manipulated? How can that be weaponized? Not just manipulated, but actually turned against them. To what degree can we affect harm? Is this going to be a force multiplier that we can utilize? Like, there's so many levels to this game. And most of us are stuck at level 1 just trying to press the start button. Like, is this an A-B controller or is this an XZ square circle? Like, where do I put my thumbs? Like, if you don't know where to put your thumbs, this is not the right game for you. Because they're playing on a totally different level.
Well, that's kind of the beauty of their game they're playing, though. That fractional thinking that you beautifully articulated is, at the moment, everyone within conspiracy circles, within the freedom movement, libertarians, what have you, are so hyper-fixated on artificial intelligence and integrated systems of surveillance, they're completely missing everything else that it's being synergistically moved and adapted to. Look at the food systems. A lot of people don't realize Palantir actively have CEOs in some of the biggest bioscience companies in the world that are linked to global production of microbes that build nutrients in the soil, build nutrients. And so much so that it's supposedly 15 million acres or 2% of US farmland already has this within it. A microbe that cannot be switched off, not killed, cannot be stopped, it just keeps reproducing. Now, it's put on the page of the documents and the scientific papers that it's doing is boosting nitrogen. But what else is it doing? This is the thing. We're getting into the realm now where this synergistic action of technocracy that's making its way into every other area that we should be focusing on at the same time instead of just fractionally thinking of technology and surveillance. It's making its way into our food, onto our plates, into the gardens which we toil and we plant and we play with our children. It's everywhere. And it's so small and minute we don't actively see it. It's not a camera that's mounted up on a wall. It's something that's in the soil that's in our gut biome if we ingest it. It's something that's horribly dangerous. It's a synthetic, unkillable, unstoppable microbes that I think the conversation will probably start to turn into soon. And if anyone has anything else to jump on before we start to get onto that train.
That sounds like a microbial rabbit.
It does, ears and all.
No, that's wild.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the soil, you can't kill it. You probably can't taste it, can't see it. I mean, it's on a micro level. No, that type of stuff, nanotechnology, is wild.
And the worst part is it's not the danger which people think it is, where it's a nanobot or something from science fiction where it's a completely artificial construct. It's something that's created synthetically that's able to adapt and change biome. It's like a biotechnology. It's like this kind of sick, twisted, Frankensteinish future where we're so scared about the DARPA dogs, but we're not worried about the biome that's in our food that we're eating.
Yeah, yeah. And adjacent to that, just to kind of paint the picture of how we are focusing on not necessarily all the wrong things, but we get hyper focused. It reminds me, remember that old sci-fi TV show, The Sentinel? How he was supposed to have super senses, but if he focused too much on one, like if he was looking so far away, then he couldn't hear or he couldn't pay attention to anything else. So I think that's what happens. But a good example of that in the food supply, not just this nitrogen generating stuff that you were talking about, Drew, is like endocrine disruption, right? Yeah. There's so many ingredients in our food that are disrupting our endocrine system. But then, and for those that don't know, it would be our hormones, our hormonal systems. It's our endocrine system. So we're talking adrenaline. We're talking, hormones that control our diet, our sleep, our sex drive, like all of this. Yeah. It's all being manipulated through seed oils, through, artificial dyes,
petroleum additives.
Petroleum additives, sugar substitutes, all of this stuff. So it's crazy that we look at the mental health of the current industrialized world, and it's just plummeting, right? Suicides are at an all-time high and all of this stuff. But it's rare that people look at the food. Like I have a family member who was on psychotropic drugs for a long time, was on disability for depression. Not once in the decades that she has been struggling with this did a doctor say, you know what, if you alter your diet and exercise, this might actually help. But what we're consuming actually changes our hormones. And one of the very specific aspects I was looking at this is in serotonin. So serotonin manages like happiness and how we can, balance our emotions. And one of the guys was saying that women use 52% less serotonin. And that's not necessarily accurate. Women actually produce 52% less serotonin than men do. We all need about approximately, the same amount of serotonin. But women, they produce it much slower than men do. So if they're consuming foods that are disrupting the production of serotonin, they're going to feel it first. So you see all of these issues in the females that, they're more depressed. And then there's even like psychologists talking about, well, that's why she, can't forgive you and remembers everything that you did wrong. It's because she doesn't have enough serotonin. That's not the way that things should be. That's the way that they are due to diet. And this is just one minute aspect to the whole spectrum of diet related problems that we have to actually take into consideration when broaching this topic. It's absolutely crazy.
You telling me food created feminism?
I don't think it created it. It definitely
to want to be drawn to something like that.
Yeah, it's hidden right in between additive red 3645. There's just feminism on the label. Just if you look closely.
Whoops, my bad.
Red 40, feminism 35.
Weight gain. What? Exactly. Weight gain, excessive tiredness, feminism, soy boys. They're all the little small side effects.
But it really is a crazy idea to think that like maybe your life is not as terrible as you think it is. Maybe you're just eating the wrong things. Like that's wild.
You know what the disconnect I think that happens with people with that is that we're taught not just fractional thinking, we're also taught compartmentalized thinking. Right? So what you're talking about right now, if you're dealing with maybe a little bit more than the average person, they'll file that under nutrition. Right? So my nutrition affects my mental health. Now, mental health's a whole other silo, but maybe we'll get these two together. Now, this is different because it's a little weird. Mental health that's the brown silo, if we're going to put a color on it for whatever reason. And then, my food, that's the green silo. The greens and the browns don't mix. Right? Like you're taught these ways of looking at stuff in a disjointed fashion.
I'm so glad you made a green silo and not something else.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I know. I had to fix that quickly. Yeah, I thought about it.
Saw you working on the fly.
Yeah, I was real quick. I was like, nah, that's the wrong color. Pick something else. Drew, I got these shades on so you can't see what I'm thinking. All right. But no, here's what's wild. So if you look at these two obviously siloed concepts or topics, right, and you put them side by side, you might start to get to the point, like you're saying, Christopher, of realizing, oh, snap, my food is affecting my mental health, right? And that becomes like an aha moment. What we probably wouldn't do is look at the other 58 other silos and start figuring out where they're connected. And even if we did that, what really isn't considered is that this is a system of control predicated on understanding your physiology and psychology, so that how you're built and how you're designed to think. I'm not going to say how you're designed to think, because nowadays that is highly manipulated. But how you think can be exploited and weaponized against you as part of a larger system of exploitation. That's the thing that's equally fascinating and troubling to me. Right, if you're dealing with a celestial power backed by other celestial powers, supported by a horde of demonic entities that have had tremendous amounts of time to study you, what does it look like when they produce weapons against you? Like, we're so relegated to two-dimensional warfare. We can't really perceive 3, 4th, or 5th dimensional warfare. Yet we're subjected to it. We just can't readily perceive it because we've only been taught like 2-dimensional. Right? So this whole concept now takes on multiple levels that the average person just isn't prepared to understand and accept. And this is what I find fascinating. Like, again, if I get back to the military, if you're dealing with a competent enemy, they look at so much more than the average person does. Right? They're looking at how things are connected. You have to study your opponent and study them well. So if you're dealing with a celestial power, let's say, like, for lack of a better phrase, Lucifer, how much time do you think he spent understanding our construction? Like Drew was just saying, if you hold the Bible and really go to that as your source, the Bible says we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Most of us are scared of how we think we're made. Right? We look in the mirror. It's like, no, I get the fearful. I don't see the wonderful part. Yeah, that part's
I see the
evading me a little
bit.
You
see the fearful.
See, the tomato. But no, if you're dealing with an enemy, he understands both of those. Right? And how do I toy with those? How do I exploit those? How do I weaponize those? How do I get a person to disregard on a mental level what they actually are, how they're constructed and what they're capable of, and at the same time exploit that on a physiological, spiritual, emotional, psychological level? What is that, like 4 or 5? They're not even thinking about those. All of those are on the table, available to be weaponized and exploited. This is what we miss. So if we're talking about being hyperfixated, the hyperfixation is being manipulated, in my opinion. Right? We're talking about AI. Nobody's talking about genetics or robotics or nanotechnology or the fact that combined with AI all make up grain technologies. Right? All that's pushing towards transhumanism. Transhumanism is pushing towards posthumanism. That is all designed to fulfill the Edenic promise that the serpent offered Eve at the very beginning. Like, what? I thought it was just artificial intelligence. How do we get on Edenic promises? Who is Edenic? I don't even know them. Right? There's all this stuff that has to truly be considered. This is the problem with being strategically dumbed down. Right? It's not that people are quote unquote stupid. It's the fact that their capacities have been impeded. I know, like, folk like Brandon and I would make the argument, they might be a little stupid. But no, most people have got, most people, we have capacities that don't get tapped into. And that's intentionally designed by the system. right? They build in consumerism. They build in, even at an academic level, learning to be dependent on a system. Why? So that you are not creative, so that you don't think outside the box, so that you don't get a problem and become solution oriented, so that you don't figure out that you have actual worth, inherent worth, that you can go to a creator God that can give you creativity and ingenuity to get out of the bondage that you're put in by people that exploit and manipulate you. We don't want that. We want you dependent on a system. That system then strategically detunes you so that it limits your language ability. Your language ability limits your cognitive ability. It limits your ability to conceptualize ideas, right? How are you going to get out of a box if you don't even have the words to describe the box you're in? All of this is strategic. So it's not so much the
compartmentalization through the school system, right? You have different periods where you just learn this thing, right? You learn health and nutrition for 45 minutes, and then the next period you learn about, psychology, so you don't learn to connect them. And it's interesting to see how widespread of an issue this is, because my wife used to be a public school teacher, but we're homeschooling our children. The biggest hurdle that we're overcoming is that properly educating our children doesn't look like bringing public education into the home. That's not what it is. It's about generating education for our children. It's about bringing the lesson to the things they're interested in, not bringing them out of what they're interested in into the lesson. Right. And this is a challenge when you're indoctrinated. This is what education looks like. This is how you're supposed to do it. It's crazy.
Exactly.
If I may. Jason, earlier you were going on a little bit of a tangent, but you're making me think of that scene from Knives Out when he says, it's a donut hole inside of a donut hole, creating an entirely different donut. What is he talking about? It's like, but that's when you start narrowing down literally the spiritual warfare of who done it, and you start connecting these dots. I think this is where it does. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, because this is what I've been telling Drew. I think a lot of people, and I'm not sure if that's with all of us, but they've done a little bit of a disservice to the extent where they sometimes put, at least myself, as to the conspiracy theory symbolism guy, and they've ejected, like, do you understand why I'm teaching you this? Well, yeah, you know this stuff. No, I'm not teaching you for that. I'm teaching you because I want fellow doers. I don't want viewers. And there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect, because when I start also offering, do you want to do a one-on-one talk session? Well, I'm not smart. I can't do that. It's like, that's irrelevant. It's not that you don't have a platform. It's not that you don't, you think you're not smart. The thing is, are you willing to discipleship and bounce ideas off of each other like we're doing right now? Compare notes, build that intellect, start thinking outside the box, look into literature that they recommend so that you start growing. And it's not to say that to demean them, but I think that, the system has even now crept into the church where people are like, well, if I'm part of the collective, part of the crew, part of the ship, that they think that, if I went to church on Sunday, I hit the checkbox, I'm good. Now, a lot of people have gotten out of that and they're in a bit of a lurch. Now what? And with all the temptation going on in the world, I think this is where Drew and I have been talking about. I called it the Gnos pull, Gnosticism, but the gospel mixed within. It's become a bit of a hybrid, but they're seeking knowledge. And what did the Bible say? That knowledge will increase in the last days. It doesn't necessarily say it'll be good knowledge, right? You'll know that
right. It doesn't tell you the type.
Yeah, it's become a hybrid, so it's becoming harder and harder to discern. And I'll close with this, but discernment. Dis means set apart, cern means horned one, and ment means mind. Discernment means set apart the horned one from your mind. And I don't think we're really being taught how to do that as Christians, because we're going to church. We're like, holy man, the guy behind the pulpit, please explain to me the problem that's going on in my life. And at like my church, they don't even want to talk about Christ boiling an excrement in hell because, that has some strong language. But it's out there. It's something that somebody else believes, and you don't want to talk about this. Well, you're causing a bit of a problem in the church. You're trying a division, and we don't want that. Well, why? Because if you're in anti-Semitism, is it this? It was like, let's break down, and you don't want to talk about it. But you just keep wanting to hit that checkbox until Jesus comes to rapture you home. I'm tired of that, because we got to start understanding we're in spiritual warfare, not just flesh and blood, but against spiritual powers and also worldly governors. I just, anyways, throw it back to the floor.
You
Drew,
just know
are we still in the realm of what you wanted to talk about?
I think so, because It's quite ironic that we're talking about the knowledge not being the best knowledge, and it's just knowledge in general. You know, you're in the end times when the average person can tell you every single Pokemon ever created, but they have to put a warning label on coolant for vehicles because it's not safe to drink. They never had to have that back 20 years, 30 years ago. Do not drink the
Yeah.
coolant, the engine coolant. It's dangerous. Please don't drink it. But I can tell you what every Pokemon is. What a wild time to be alive. We've just
they
lost
changed
all this
Kool-Aid.
fundamental language.
You know, when Kool-Aid started getting changed and it tastes a little bit like 50-50 coolant, what do you expect? This is what you get. You get people that can't tell the difference now.
Jim Jones approved.
Right?
It's really sad because we've talked about this before, though, with sports, like especially football being the modern day bread and circus, right? Because I've sat through so many conversations about statistics and, you know, rings and successes and careers. And I mean, so much information about these players, where they came from, their injuries, you know, the whole schedule of whoever they're playing that year. And then you go have a conversation like, well, what are your thoughts about the second law of thermodynamics? Oh, I'm not that smart. I've been listening to you like spout information for 3 weeks. You're smart. You've just invested all of that cognitive energy into the wrong things.
I blame fantasy football. It's just Dungeons and Dragons for overweight middle-aged men.
I got to get into fantasy football.
No, on a side note, Christopher, that's interesting you said that because it ties into what Jason said about silos. I was talking to a coworker of mine this is about a year or two ago. And I was listening to the lyrics to this song, and one of the lyrics mentions the word hayloft, and somebody in the comment section, "What's a hayloft?" I was like, "Oh boy, this is kind of sad if you don't even know what a hayloft." So I went over to my coworker, and I literally said, "I'm like, it's kind of sad when people don't know what a hayloft is." He's like, "What is a hayloft?" I was like, "Wait, what?"
Hayloft is when you say hello to a Scandinavian friend. Hayloft.
Yeah, he's like, no, it's like, I don't know what it is. I said, you've never been on a school trip where they took you to the farm, you saw a silo, you know, this is the hayloft up here, this is where we feed the animal. He says, no. I says, holy crap. He said, listen, man, you told me you don't really care too much about cars, right? And I'm like, yeah. He says, do you know every part inside of every single engine of every different car? No. He says, exactly, because you only invest your energy in things that you're interested in. And I looked at him, I said, you know what, touche, I'll give you that, because he's a city kid, never probably gone out to the farm and stuff like that. I said, touche, that's a fair point. But you're right, you invest your energy in things that you love. And this is why I think the psalmist is like, thy word I study upon, you know, day and night, so I may not sin against thee. This is what a Christian's supposed to be, is like, even though I'm in the world, I have a spiritual priority of things that I'm thinking about. And I can't let it corrupted or muffled up with, you know, things of this world or the statistics of the bread and circuses, as it were.
Right. That's what I'm starting to find, man, for me. The more that this worldview and cognitive framework is adjusted to be in line with the biblical framework that God provides, the more I'm able to do that, or the more that's happening to me, the more fascinating I'm beginning to find scripture. Right now, outside of that, if you rewind me backwards, it's less fascinating, less interesting, less relevant to the things that I got going on. You know, but if you hear like a scripture, Jesus ate nuts, you know, my perverted mind would be like, oh, did he? Wow, nobody told me that story. But then when you find out that no, there's like a real benefit to the dietary selection that Christ chose. Right. So the fact that he may have been eating a particular type of thing that scripture records, you're like, oh, snap. That's got more significance than what I thought. Like this dude coming down here in 33 years is hitting every freaking box that has to be hit. Yep. I can't hit every box in 5 minutes that needs to be hit. He did it for like 33 years. I think, unfortunately, we've both been the victim and the culprit in giving the Bible a bad rap. Yeah. And because of that, we don't really value it, and we don't value what it can really do, even for the modern day serious believer and serious follower of Christ. Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the biggest problems.
I think maybe far too often people fall into the trap of the Bible is a tangible physical thing that you can wield. I think it goes the other way. The Bible wields you. Like you're there to pull it apart, understand it as best as you can. Like, we're
Mm-hmm.
fallible, we're human beings, and this is the closest thing we have to God in the physical world right now.
Mm.
This is what we've got.
Right.
We have to try and understand it as best as we can. And when you see it as a tool or a weapon, you're naturally going to fall for a lot of the tricks that I think the great discernment plays on us. And it's that synergistic ability to apply everything we've been talking about through a militaristic lens that we're not doing. We're compartmentalizing things into their own little fracture, whether it's education system, whether it's our interests. We are honing in on one focus and we don't allow it to overlap other areas that it naturally blends into. But the world we live in isn't black and white in a sense that things have to be in set boxes. It has shades of grey that it overlaps. And this is where we see this movement of what I would say is a very militaristic plan to apply a surveillance state, bioorganics, and technology into some kind of a hideous future that will impact the human form in ways that we can't possibly perceive. And these systems in play, these CEOs, these researchers will say as much. They have no idea what's going to happen. They're just doing it.
Right.
And I've got to go on a little bit of a rant here with some quotes, if you'll indulge me, gentlemen. But Christopher, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say real quick, we've kind of bounced back and forth between like, we don't know, generally speaking, we don't know what's going to happen if we introduce this technology, if we introduce this genetic editing. But then Jason, you're talking about full spectrum dominance and what the enemy actually knows. So I think we have to appreciate what they're telling us, right? That what most people haven't considered, but there is probably an upper echelon, if nothing else, the forces of darkness that are pushing people into these different emerging technologies that really understand what's going to happen, even if the terrestrial entities don't understand yet.
There's the truth and the truth.
Exactly. And if you weren't watching Drew, he was shaking his head yes and no.
I think before you start, Drew, I think there's a quote that's hitting me from Jurassic Park. Your scientists were so interested to see if they didn't really stop to think that they really should. And I think that's like, even though we have like 8, 9 movies of that thing now, they still keep going back to the same problem as hitting head against the wall. And it's like we never seem to learn our lesson. But I think that's also a spiritual reminder, is that even though we had the Great Flood, we're still going back to the days of Noah, despite our better interests. Anyways.
Well, gentlemen, if you ever want to break down a film, break down the second last Jurassic World movie, because it ties into a lot of the stuff we're discussing today. I'll talk to you after this about that. Quickly, I've just got to go into some of the big corporations that are delving into biosciences and a lot of these microbiomes that are being released into farms around the world. Shyam Sankar, CTO of Palantir and chairman of the board of GKO Biosciences, has recently been quoted in an interview as saying, "The mission of GKO is to make biology easier to engineer. And if you kind of squint at it, you can think of a cell as like a computer. You put code in, you get code out. This is the future of manufacturing, where we can program a cell, provide feedstock like sugar and water, and you can get a product out of it." Furthermore, the CEO of GKO rather, Jason Kelly, tweeted similar statements about US farmland. The agricultural production in the US is an untapped manufacturing base. More than just food and biotechnology. It will unlock it and be the great way to increase profit margins for farmers. So already they're putting the idea of a farm is no longer just a farm. It has greater potential. They can turn something minute and invisible to the human eye into a manufacturing basis. Through the right tweaking, the right manipulations, the right programming, as they say, they can turn what's in our soil into a manufacturing hub. And this is where we get into a company called Pivot Biosciences. They've ironically created a product called Proven, a genetically modified nitrogen-fixing microbe, which I alluded to earlier. This was achieved through CRISPR technologies. They essentially went through, removed a couple of genes, and released it into the wild to see what would happen. And to their surprise, it fixed the soil. It boosted the nitrogen. Where it was lacking nitrogen, it created it. And they went, oh, geez, this is actually good. Now it's a proven technology because we've just done it. It supercharged it, but the problem is it doesn't turn off. Natural microbiomes in soil will adapt to the surrounding soil's needs. If there's not enough nitrogen, it'll boost it. If there's too much nitrogen, it'll switch itself off. It'll go dormant. This one just keeps chugging and chugging along. It's like a little engine that could. It won't stop. And this is the danger. It's out-competing natural biome in the soils.
But they released into the wild, not in a controlled
not in a controlled environment, not some kind of
That's
science
the
fiction
point that
movie where
gets
it breaks
me.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the rabbits again.
And openly, we didn't know what it would do, but we're happy that it did it.
Right.
Now, the biggest issue with this is the inability to switch it off. It keeps producing, keeps coming back. And then we have the really Frankenstein stuff. So that's one thing. You can look at that as being, that's okay. It's improving the nitrogen. You know, crops need nitrogen to grow. We're going to have greater crop yields. What's wrong with it? What's the issue? Well, you get into the Frankenstein stuff of microbes that are engineered to exude peptides. For people who don't know what peptides are, it's an organic acid in the stomach that breaks down matter. The problem is what they got it from was the genetic venom of spiders. So they've genetically engineered the peptides from spider venom into microbes. So it exudes a peptide which kills other bugs and bacteria around it to make sure the plants and the soil is more nutrient and can fight off disease and infestation. On paper, sounds great. You know, stronger crop yields, improved productivity. This sounds awesome. But there's a little thing called horizontal and vertical gene transfer. Vertical is the up and down, mum and dad to a baby. Gene transfer through natural reproduction. Horizontal is across species. So what potentially could happen with these biomes, and they've tracked it already happening, is you eat this biome that's in the food, it's in the soil, gets into the food, you eat some GMO corn, and that biome gets into your stomach biome. And then you get horizontal gene transfer, in which there's the potential for the human body to start producing peptides from spider venom. And at the worst possible scenario, what you end up with is a gene transfer that would make your body engage a necrosis of the flesh around it. Anyone who's ever been bitten by a spider, like a black widow or something really big like a redback in Australia, it eats away the flesh around where the venom is. If your gut biome is producing that, what's it going to do to your internal organs? That's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, maybe get a bit of an upset tummy and you have to go to the toilet a couple of times. But the potential from here to there is so vast, and it's just a flip a coin and see what happens scenario, according to them. But if there are bigger players at the top who are investing money into this research and telling people to keep going, they tend to have they know what's going on. They see the wizard behind the curtains. They know what the plan is. They're just delivering it in micro doses to the people who do the work for them, and they're oblivious. It's that silo work that's going on. So we've got this huge issue happening now where it's not just the plants that we're ingesting, the food, the beef, what have you. It can actually impact our DNA to an extent where people are really worried about hyperfixation, mRNAs. What about the microbiome that's in the food that we're ingesting on a daily basis? That could theoretically have that horizontal gene transfer, and we could end up with all sorts of issues. We've known since like the early 90s that Monsanto, which is now Bayer, they were injecting scorpion venom into tomatoes to stop pests from eating it.
Oh, of course.
What are the longitudinal studies of that on the human processes? We're seeing all these things come out now, like we were talking earlier. Depression's at an all-time high. The IQ is literally dropping. The current generation is going to be the first generation in recorded history that's dumber than the ones that came before them. This should be a huge concern considering the large amounts of information at our disposal. But it's multi-tiered. It's not just the diet and the things that we're ingesting that are impacting our intelligence. It's the ability for us to access it, what we're actually accessing. And it's that multi-layered, interwoven mesh of warfare that is based in spirituality that is actually impacting us on the physical plane. Like, this is the thing. If they can't control the spiritual side of the war, the only way they can do that is to manipulate the physical world that we live in. And they're pulling out all the stops, all the bells and whistles on every single possible platform and area to impact us. And unfortunately, they're doing really well. That's the danger. Like, if I was to be a Bond villain, man, those are great ideas. Great for a Bond film, not for reality.
Right.
Was Thanos wrong?
It kept reminding me of the Rockefellers. So the Rockefellers and petroleum-based products and all of that, and then funding Harvard and agro-business. But one of the methods that the Rockefellers had was establishing this thing called value chains, and it sounds great, right? Value chains from commercial perspective makes sense. But it's the idea that a single company would own all of the means of production from the field all the way to you purchasing it from the store. That's the value chain. So that you control the soil, the seed, the harvesting, the package, the processing, the packaging, the marketing, all the way into the store. And it's crazy because they that in conjunction with the loss of knowledge now has given them the platform that they can do whatever they want. And where else are we going to get food? For a majority of people, you don't know how. You don't know how to garden. You don't know how to hunt. If you do, you don't know where to go to acquire those things. So they've literally given themselves, they've cultivated through, like you said, the mesh, the multi layers of systems of evil have created a place where they can do, we can literally do whatever we want to the food and everyone's going to keep eating it because most people don't have another option.
And if it's in the wild and it infects the soil, you can't be the stereotypical prepper of the 90s and the early 2000s where you can go off into the wilderness and grow your own fruits and vegetables. It's going to keep producing and infect every single element of the biosphere. This is the danger.
Right.
You can't run away from it forever.
Right. It's
Drew, have you ever heard of Celeste Solum?
Was she the Agenda 21 2030?
She's done a lot of that stuff and even more. But one of the things she talked about, we had her on the show at one point, we want to get her back on. She talked about what she, first of all, let me step back and say, she reads, I think, maybe 100, 150 journals and articles a week just to stay on top of what is happening behind the scenes through some of her military contacts and things like that. And one of the things she was mentioning last year was that according to, I don't want to misquote this, I'll say the powers that be, they have stated that they have been successful and all the way down at the cellular level, creating synthetic biology or synthetic biological versions of our food.
Yeah.
All the way down.
Yeah.
The whole food supply. They've done it. They've mapped it. It's contaminated. And to her point, she said, at this stage of the game, avoiding that is impossible. What you need now, which is what we've needed all along, but there is less leniency for not having it, is an actual relationship with the creator who can sustain you, right? You literally have got to pray over your food, not the old way, good food, good meat. Come on, Lord, let's eat. Like, you literally have to be intentional about what you are praying about and asking the Lord to literally bless your food, because it's not food in the traditional sense, right? And there is an attack again on our physiology and psychology, even through the back door of what we eat in order to gain access. We were having a conversation, Christopher and I, with Vicki Joy Anderson. I'm sure you've heard of her. And Vicki was having a conversation with us talking about parasites. One of my favorite things to talk about when, I'm about to shout out on a chicken leg. Let's talk about parasites. But she brought up a very provocative idea to me at the time, which was this notion that demonic entities were able or possibly able to co-join to parasites in order to gain access to a person's body.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, that's a crazy idea. And suddenly I feel itching in my feet. I don't even know what's going on, Vicky. We got to stop talking about this.
Brother, there's a reason why the Legion was asked to be cast into a herd of pigs for a reason.
Yeah. Right. And
pigs
she
are the greatest
talked
source
about
of
that.
Parasites in the animal kingdom that humans ingest on a regular basis. And it's a shame. It's
Right.
like bacon. Like, pig is the best magical animal. Bacon, pork, ham. It's got all the best meats in it.
List of grievances to the creator.
The only person that cares about your breakfast, Jesus does. That's why he created bacon.
It's a magical
He cares
animal.
about you. Right. He cares about your breakfast. But here's what's crazy, though. We're talking about bacon. Bacon used to be a throwaway meat.
Yeah.
Until Edward Bernays came along and made it a staple. So even the fact that we like it so much is manufactured.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Used to not be something we ate.
Lobsters are bottom feeders, and they were literally given to people in mental asylums because it was cheap.
Don't talk about the lobsters, okay? Lobster's a delicacy. Little clarified butter, and I know this is from the Lord. This is good meat.
Man, I just know I'm getting a cease and desist letter from Red Lobster later.
Well, Red Lobster sucks.
One time.
So they tell you not to.
One time.
Don't worry about them.
On vacation, I bought a whole lobster, and I was like, never again.
Bro, the same thing happened to me.
Is it weird that you have like the whole carcass right in front of you and you're just like taking it apart?
It's looking at you.
I'm like, it's a giant cockroach. Why did I pay this much money for a boiled cockroach? No, thank you.
I think we had different takeaways because I didn't hit the cockroach part. I couldn't get past the eyeball. I was like, this thing is looking at me, and I'm taking his hand. Yeah, the whole time he was like, really, bro? You just gonna nibble on my hand in front of me? I was like, butter soak up with the butter. I'm sorry, Mr. Lobster. Can I get that other part? Then I ate his behind because I had to eat the tail. And I was like, something about this feels real wrong to me. All of a sudden, right? When they give you the tail by itself, compartmentalized, it's not a problem. When they give you the whole package, it was like, I don't think I should be eating that. That doesn't seem right. I think I'm gonna go with the crab now.
It's the shifts in food, though, and you've hit on some good points there. We've been conditioned into thinking certain foods are good for us because the food pyramid. We know that's horribly inverted and been a creation. Kellogg's, cereal. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. All these psychological elements of warfare have been thrust upon us into accepting certain foods as being good for us, as having it at the right time of the day. It's a delicacy, like you mentioned earlier, Jason. It goes even into the elements of finances and politics. At the moment, the big thing in the political sphere of the world is the green agenda. And how can you make sure farming is green, equitable, and not impacting the planet? Well, and one for that is make sure you have nutrient-rich soil, something you don't have to keep putting fertilizer on, something you don't have to keep using traditional Western methods of tilling the soil because you're damaging the ecosystem. If we've got a microbe that can go in there and do all the work for you, fantastic. That agenda starts to influence way into the financial sphere of the world. And I'll give you an example. There's many groups like Bayer, Monsanto, whatever they want to be called now. They give financial incentives to farmers to have their crop and their crop alone. And they get huge amounts of money compared to the average person who's using traditional heirloom seeds.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a system in which mass Western farming is starting to collapse in a lot of ways, you inevitably get farmers that are going to go bankrupt. And one of the latest US reviews in finances had somewhere between 25 to 40% of US farms could go bankrupt this financial year. Now, not all of them are going to go out of business completely and disappear. A lot of them will get propped up by the banks, or they'll get propped up by a company like Bayer. But there will be stringent contractual obligations they'll have to meet to do that. One of those might be, you need to introduce this microbiome. We've tested your soil, it's not good enough. You need to use our seeds. A lot of these things, farmers, their livelihoods on the line. I've got to feed my family. This is what my family's been doing for generations. It's our tradition. How am I going to save what I'm doing? Well, of course those people are going to sign on the dotted line. And then what happens? That has an impact onto the food systems. It impacts the rest of us who buy into those foods and use those on a daily basis. It's that multi-leveled attack. It's finances, it's politics, it's worldviews. It's telling us what we think we should be eating. It's amazing how far this goes when you're not looking at the fractals like you mentioned earlier, Jason. It's far bigger than any one issue.
Full spectrum dominance warfare. That's what they're practicing. And I tell you, as you were talking, Drew, a moment ago about some of the products that were being produced based upon genetic manipulation, the more I listen to it, the one thing that keeps hitting in my spirit that this sounds like is occult science, right? Specifically, if Satan is unable to create, the only thing he can do is manipulate.
Yep.
Right? So if you're not appealing to the creator to actually do some of these things, right? Like, can you create a peptide? Yeah, of course I can create one. But if I don't want to talk to you and I don't want to deal with you to create the peptide, I'll tell you what I can do. I can take a little bit of what you got over here and I can mix that with a little bit of what you got over there. And I can create this here peptide. Now, there might be some fallout, but what's fallout among friends? It'll be all right. You can put that limb back. We'll create a whole new thing to help glue that on for you. It's a domino effect of continued manipulation to get outside of dealing with the creator. Right? If you've got soil that, well, hold on just a second, Christopher. If you've got soil that you want to increase the nitrogen yield in, that's only because you're working in the framework that God set up in the first place. But the way he sets up this framework, things are dependent on one another. Christopher blew my mind this week or last week. He had a situation on the property that resulted in a fish kill, right? Where the whole pond, there's a whole heap of problems. But I'm a city guy, right? So I don't even know what a fish kill is. It sounded like a good thing. Like I got the deep fryer and the batter out. I was like, you got a fish kill. Hey, this is good. In February? This is real good. Let's do it. No. Then he told me what it was, and I was like, this is absolutely disgusting. Like the idea that in this pond, I guess when things froze over, Christopher, I have you. I don't know why I need to tell your story. What happened?
So had a whirlwind of negative things happen. So we had I had recently moved in with my mom to help her take care of this property, but it had been mismanaged before. So the seaweed and stuff was overgrown, which is a problem. The water level was really low, and that's how we went into the winter. And then we had, out of nowhere, freak snowstorm. It froze over and stayed like sub-zero temperatures for 2 to 3 weeks. So this blots out all of the sunlight that's getting to the seaweed, and the low water level causes all of these issues. You get high amounts of CO2 that build up. It's called a winter kill. There's several other things that can cause a fish kill, drastic temperature changes in the spring, some algae blooms and things like that. But it drastically lowers the level of oxygen in the water. So then a bunch of fish die, like almost all of the fish, the tadpoles, the frogs. So I'm talking thousands of carcasses. And we didn't realize,
absolutely terrible.
Oh, it's disgusting. And we didn't realize until after it thawed. And my son got a remote control boat for his birthday. So we were anxiously waiting for the pond to thaw so we could put the boat in. I put the boat in and I was like, oh, that's not good. There's just, as far as the eye could see, is just carcasses lining the bottom of the pond. It's disgusting.
So here I am, city boy. And I'm like, so what's the problem, man? Just like, dig that out, scoop that up real quick, and then add some more fish. Like, can't you just dump some more fish into the pond and restock it? And Christopher was like, no, you can't do that. You got to get like starter fish. I thought starter fish were like the ones that come in a little bag that you get from the little aquarium store, little small ones. Yeah, pretty much. I'm telling you, I'm a city boy. So I was like, little starter fish. He's like, no, you got to get fish that are able to deal with the level of oxygen and bacteria that's in there to like replenish all of it. And then they become like feed for larger fish and all that. I was like, oh, snap. There's a real system to this. And what struck me was the way I would do it would be terrible. It would probably lead to more death. But the way I would do it would not be predicated on God's system. So what really struck me was like, oh man, God really set up a full system of how this is supposed to go. This is why I bring this up. You go back to the field and the peptides and all of that. Can you exploit nitrogen yields? Yes. Will it violate the system God set up? Yes, but we don't think he exists. So who cares? Right? Why do you need to increase nitrogen yield? Because you're dealing with land that has been stripped of its nutrients due to overpopulation, not of human population, but overproduction. That's the word I'm looking for. We've through greed overworked the land, but more importantly, we don't follow the biblical model of giving the land rest. If we followed the biblical model and gave the land rest, it would naturally regenerate these things that we say we have to synthetically generate. So all of this thing goes back to occult sciences, occult systems, things that we're trying to do outside of God's framework in order to create or to terraform a world that can exist without him. That's the spiritual backing behind all of this. So yeah, while what we eat is important, I think people have got to really understand what we eat, what we think about, what we wear, the drugs we put in, the energy production we go through. All of this stuff is being forced through what Christopher and I call the net industrial complex. And it's designed to literally weaken humanity so that they're more susceptible to accepting satanic doctrine, which means then there is a spiritual push to all of this. It's not just about our air. It's not just about our water. It's not just about our food or our textiles or pharmaceuticals or biochemical engineering or any of this other type of stuff. It is truly about the spiritual realm that exists right outside of our dimensional realm of existence. And it is literally trying to direct us to a very specific locale on the cosmic chessboard as part of fulfillment of Revelation 13. All of this is playing into a biblical framework to produce the replacement Christ and wipe humanity off the scene. All of it.
Well,
and I think if people can't get that into their head, they're missing the picture.
I think that veers very similar to what you had in 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink or whatsoever you do everything for the glory of God. I think a lot of us were reading these verses. A lot of it is on missions and also saying setting people apart from the assembly that are causing problems after you tried to reconcile. But like we've kind of ejected a lot of this from it. The concept of charging interest on somebody for rent was even 1%. When Nehemiah was rebuilding the thing, he was like, I'm going to take from the moneylenders, but we're getting this in writing because if you guys goof this up. No, so we've inverted it so much that we don't even have the concept of the year of Jubilee. We wouldn't be $38 trillion in debt if we actually lived by that system. That would have been fixed and resolved years ago. But again, by man's systems, occult systems, well, we have to please the harvest god this year. We got to do a sacrifice this. We got to do that. As opposed to saying, you know what? Even if I don't have something tomorrow, I'm going to rely on the daily bread of God. I'm going to trust in manna or ravens from heaven to provide for me. Or I'll just fast and focus on the goodness of what God gave me that I'm able to sustain for a couple days, maybe a month like Christ did. We don't even want to tepidly go into that side of the pool because they're like, well, that's way too much. You know what? As long as I accepted Jesus into my heart, I'm once saved, always saved. Boom, I'm good. That's it. I don't need to do anything more. No, there's a lot of work that goes into this. It's like you go to a dojo, but then you just, you sit there on the sidelines, you watch everybody else practice, and you yourself, you never apply anything. It's like, yeah, you can read the word. The sleeping bridesmaids read the word, but what were they missing? Oil. And oil is Holy Spirit discernment. You can read the text, sure enough, just like the Pharisees and elders and scribes. But if you're not having oil within you, you don't have any light to understand what it is you're reading. So yeah, you can read from the same book, but you'll misunderstand all of what it's supposed to be, applicational.
Right.
It's fascinating in the US experience more than anywhere else because you see factory farming at the most highest level in the US compared to a lot of other countries. And I think it goes hand in hand with capitalism that built that in a lot of ways of always having to improve, always have greater yields, always having to have greater profits. Traditional farming and aquaculture, permaculture, all these things that people are trying to relearn now, that went by the wayside and people were kind of forced into having monocrops. And that culminated with the Depression. Prior to that, there was this big push into you're just corn. Because you have a corn contract, you need to produce as much corn as you can to make money. But prior to that, a lot of farmers dabbled in things. They had corn, they had beef, they had chickens, they had ducks, what have you. They hedged their bets a little bit, knowing that some seasons can be bad, some can be better.
Right.
Going into a monocrop allowed for the Dust Bowl to take effect and impact a lot of farmers and led to a lot of people losing everything. And a lot of this isn't new. We keep thinking about the way in which politics, science, all these aspects that are forcing people into certain ways and of means of doing things is new. If you go back historically, you have to look at some of the earliest civilizations and the advent of bread and grain.
Yeah.
It was grain that was fed to the paupers and to the masses and the people that were building these monstrosities, apparently, these huge monoliths. It was the kings and the pharaohs, the lords, they were having meat and vegetables and all the nutritious things they should be having. Yet out of nowhere, on the grand scale of scientific knowledge, grain just appears. Something that was a derivative of grass is suddenly fit for human consumption. So this is a complete assumption of mine, but based on the events of today and knowing how the playbook of the enemy tends to be the same, it just adapts over time and changes its position. You could easily make an argument that grain as we know it today even as of 60, 70 years ago, was a derivative created by the powers that be in their time. Make food for the masses, fill their tummies, fed is better than dead, but don't make it nutritious. You can live off grain alone. That's fine. But you're going to be weak, you're going to be feeble-minded, you're going to have the ability to rise up and see your oppressors. And when you're in societies that have arguably been set up by fallen angels larping as gods, it becomes even more nefarious. And today, those kind of roles have just been replaced by the kings of old are now the corporate CEOs and the powerhouse industrymen, the people who run big oil, the people who run big pharmaceuticals. They are those same types of figureheads, just changing suits and positions.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, a lot of it comes from, like I said, agribusiness and these value chain models and things like that. But I think because Jordan P. Peterson talks a lot about, oh, well, we were just trying to create cheap calories and we overdid it. And that's kind of where we are now. But I think it misses the point. I think all along, the creation of this. Now, maybe not all the human emissaries were fully aware of what they were contributing to, with the bleaching and the cracking of the grain and all of that. But there seems to be a systematic approach to slowly poison the human population. And it's really interesting because this is evident in like preservatives. Like, oh, things are preserved. That sounds like a really good thing. But you go down the line and what all preservatives are doing is making this food product unpalatable for every other biological substance until it gets to your table. Like, wait a minute, so nothing else wants to eat my food except for me? This is kind of a problem. And then even things like nitrates. Nitrates are fine in, they prevent bacteria and stuff from building on, specifically like pork is what it's used a lot in processed meats. But then you cook it and then it becomes toxic. So I'm supposed to eat my sausage raw? Now, Jason, don't take that the wrong way.
Oh, too late. You done already said that with a smile on your face.
It's crazy. There's been an orchestrated shift to they need to mass produce, whether it was like you were saying, Drew, the microbes that generate all this extra nitrogen in the soil and all of that. It doesn't seem like they care what happens to it as long as they can get a larger crop yield and it can stay green or whatever color it needs to until you buy it. After that, no one cares. Sure. No one cares if there's cancer building up. No one cares if you've got leaky gut. If, you start getting, what'd you say, necrosis of the gut because you're producing spider proteins or whatever. Like historically, they don't seem to care. And the FDA even says that they don't monitor chronic poisons, only acute ones. So if it's not going to kill you now and it'll just kill you over time, that's kind of outside of our wheelhouse. We apologize if this happens, but we don't actually handle that. So it's crazy. They, on one hand, they play, we're just dumb. We're trying to do this and help everybody out. On the other hand, there definitely seems to be a systematic approach to slowly poison us. And then going back to scriptures, there's the scripture that says, they can eat poison and they won't be killed. As a kid, you read that and you're like, well, who would do that? And then you look at the standard American diet or any other industrialized country and like, no, everybody's really consuming lots of poisons. This is a normal thing. And it's great that God had anticipated this in times of old, which is pretty crazy.
There's a scene from a science fiction series called Fringe. And there's a bit of a mad scientist character, and he goes into a modding shopping center after being in an asylum for 30 years. And he looks at the ingredients on the back, and he's going through them one by one. He goes, "What is wrong with you people? They're poisoning us. They're killing you all." Because he knows what those ingredients do. They're all carcinogenic, poisonous elements. And whether, a lot of these things are put in our face or hinted at us in cinema, a lot of people say it's their way of relieving karmic debt. They have to tell you what they're doing. Sometimes I think, it could be just great scientific writing and some people can actually see the potential hazards and they write about it. Either way, we're getting a small window in the potential outcome that could occur. And one of the big ones is the film Interstellar, in where they live in a world in which there's massive food shortages, there's blights that are wiping out crops, and in that film, it is the very last crop of corn existent on Earth. And farming is the most important job, and they're trying to get people to be farmers. And you look into the story production of this, the background is it's all around monocrops, engineered GMO crops that were so abundant and so big, it destroyed diversity. And all it required was a blight to come along and wipe out entire yields forever. And they end up in this world that's slowly dying away because this introduced biome is impacted blight. It's created all these diseases and wipes out our food supply. And then there's another one. You see, if you guys are Marvel fans, you would have seen the latest Wolverine film, in which it's the future and where everyone has died and there's no more mutants. Well, we find in the storyline of that the mutant gene has been suppressed and turned off through the introduction of GMOs in sugary drinks, in Coca-Cola.
Yep. Yeah.
So, if they can talk about it and come up with these wonderful ideas in science fiction, there's the potential for that. So, you have to ask these questions, like play with it, play devil's advocate, and whatever. At least think about it. Maybe I shouldn't have that third Diet Coke for the day.
Yeah.
Even the first.
And this touches on, you were talking about consumerism and overproduction a little bit earlier, Jason. This is something that usually isn't, because everything is siloed. This isn't brought up in this conversation. There's so many people in the world, despite the fact that birth rates are dropping dramatically all over the world, which is going to be catastrophic. But we did an episode, I don't know if you remember which one it was, but we went through like the last like 10 or 15 major famines in the world, and none of them were actually due to just the lack of resources. There was always an intentional obfuscation, selling off resources, intentionally destroying crops. It was the mismanagement of resources, not the lack thereof. And if you look at how much food is wasted because of the current model, the overproduction and we're just consumers, right? We don't know how to do anything on our own. We're just taught to work a job and buy stuff. So we even it's a thing here at my house that we're trying to implement like strict rules on how to consistently go through our inventory and eat things, so we're not throwing things out. We pay lots of money for food that is better for us, which means it's going to expire soon, which means if we're not careful, then we're spending, hundreds and hundreds of dollars on stuff that we throw out before it ever hits our mouths. And then you buy extra food at the restaurant, and you bring it home and you don't eat it and you throw it out. It's as much as they try to tell us that it's, there's dwindling resources and there's too many people. That's not the problem. And it has almost never been the problem. It's the mismanagement of those resources. That one right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Manufacturer scarcity is a major, major issue. One, because it leads to poverty, and then poverty leads to crime. Crime leads to chaos, and chaos is the optimal environment that the power elites, if you will, are looking for to create in order to bring back their serpent god. Right? All of this, again, has got spiritual backing behind it. I'm thinking about also, like you were saying, Christopher, with the famines. I remember us doing that episode. I don't remember which episode it was. But the whole thing with you look in scripture with a lot of these food shortages, and they have spiritual catalysts behind them. Mm-hmm. Right? If it's got a spiritual catalyst behind it, then a bioengineered solution is not the solution.
Right.
Even
That's
now.
A good point.
Yeah, but check this out. Even now, the idea that we need the bioengineered solution in case there's a food shortage is also being spiritually motivated.
Right.
It's on both sides of the equation. That's the thing I think causes me the most alarm. Right? I find these discussions absolutely fascinating, but there's also a troubling component because they're not just like futurist conversations from a dystopian perspective. This is really the byproduct of grasping and coming to terms with the idea that, again, we're in an active theater of war, and everything is being weaponized against us, including our food, including our environment. Like, our very environment is being weaponized. It's one thing like eat the wrong thing. It's another thing for your stuff to be grown in soil that is toxic, if you will, right? That's harmful to you, where the stuff is being transmitted into your body through what I think the term was that Drew used, so much smarter than me. Was it horizontal
gene transfer?
Yeah, see, I love the fact that you know this type of stuff. I'd be like, the genes go that way, and they go the way they ain't supposed to go, right? But
HGT.
Horizontal gene transfer. See, I don't want to memorize it that way. That's going to be wrong. Right, but you have all of these type of things. It's like everywhere you turn around, there's something that's being worked, not just against us, but against the way our creators design things to work. And that was what is so evident back in Genesis. The violation of the distinction of kinds indicated a law of reversals, right? We're doing things the opposite way of what God has actually established, which gives you then an indication of the spiritual fingerprint of what's motivating the changes that were happening in that environment. Those are the same forces alive today that are really pushing this. You mentioned a moment ago, Drew, the United States and why things are so bad. A lot of times people might look at the United States and just think it's the Americans and their greed that push this. And I understand that. But the thing that gets overlooked is the fact the United States is a geopolitical company that was dedicated to all pagan gods. That dedication hasn't been reversed. So when you have gods like Minerva, Brandon would know much better than I would, all these gods that are over the United States, a lot of that also impacts fertility. It impacts crop yields and things like that. There's a God that's over it that the United States was dedicated to. Those gods require blood sacrifices. Is there any wonder then that we see in these various areas death being the end result? It's still spiritual at the end of the day.
And then you have to have a lot of these famines being mass sacrifices that have been brought about for said
That's
gods.
A fair question.
And this is where my little mind as a lover of science fiction goes. Let's just say that this microbiome that's there to boost nitrogen goes completely haywire, outcompetes all the native forms of microbiome in the soil, completely takes over. And the natural reaction of the governments, the bioscience divisions of the world is they somehow come out of the way to kill it. Great, awesome, we've got a way to kill this biome so we can reintroduce the original one. What are the unintended consequences of resisting something that kills biome? What if it kills off all microbial life and all bioorganic life? And we end up with a population like America starving overnight.
Well, we were trying to reduce our carbon footprint, so this helps.
You are the carbon they want to reduce.
Precisely.
Exactly. Yep. That's it.
Two things that I was thinking of is the movie Idiocracy, where they're putting all that crap on their crops. What?
It's got electrolytes.
Yeah, it's stupid stuff. Yeah. When you just said interstellar, that made me chuckle, because the original dictionary definition is occurring or situated between stars. Etymology-wise, inter means place for two more corpse. Stellar means relating to stars. Stars were known as angels to a lot of the ancient cultures, so you could be saying dead angels or dead stars when you're saying interstellar. And I just find that interesting in relation to the topic that you're talking about this. It's like they even put it in titles, and we're over saying, like, remember that movie? It's like, yeah, and do you understand what you're saying when you say that word? No?
Right.
Okay. Because we don't understand context, because I was telling, I think Drew and I were having this DM that stars, crowns, or coronas was connected with Moloch ceremonies, anointing of kings in pagan cultures. And I'm going, interesting, because one of the early church fathers, as it were, when he was writing a dissertation in regards to a soldier that says, I can't wear a corona, which is like one of those little wreaths that they place on your heads, said, I can't wear that because, you know, I'm a citizen of heaven. I can't wear that. And he said, yes, we do not wear the devil's mark upon our foreheads. And I was going, what the heck, dude? We just had a whole thing with this corona, and you're telling that the devil's mark? Like, what the hell? But yeah, I find it interesting, dude. Maybe it's not so much like predictive programming, but it's also the jester gives you the hard truths, right? That's always been their role in society. And they call them stars of Hollywood, right? You're being an avatar of whatever thing you're supposed to be representing, right? And they make these contracts with them. They put your star, a pentagram, on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, right? and you are supposed to be telling the populace the hard truths via entertainment. And so it's very lighthearted. We're like, oh, so this is your bedside manner of telling me I'm basically going to die because you're a psychopath. That's right, but you need to do it just one more time. And whether it's like a movie of patriotism, it's like, you got to go over there and fight for the state because, that's how we keep our freedom. It's also how you keep the merchant corporate class going and, hurting a lot of people. But you're right, for patriotism, hoorah. And you just kind of delude everybody from saying, you know what? I understand that stuff can be entertaining, but ultimately, my citizenship is in heaven. I'm focused on things above, not on things of this earth. So I think, in a sense, they're taking control of our mind and they're also taking control of our body. And when both go, you're an autonomous robot. You become like the statues in which you were idolizing without even realizing it.
Mm-hmm. You have to differentiate between entertainment and entertaining the idea that they're trying to put forward. Like, what's the potentiality of this actually occurring? Okay, well, let's take into effect this is what's happening now. This is what could happen. Maybe genetically engineering microbes wasn't the best idea. And if you take it back to like a localized version, you gave great examples, Jason, how the military plays out every possible scenario, even the ones they can't possibly think could happen. They play it to the nth degree to make sure they've got all their boxes ticked.
Right.
Take it back again as an individual. If I'm burning off leaves in my backyard from autumn, and there's an abundance of leaves I can't put in my compost bin, I just got too much. I need to make sure it's not moist. I need to make sure it's dry, but I need to make sure I'm burning it in a safe way that's not going to impact me or my neighbors. I'm not just going to have a whole pile of leaves, throw a match and go, I don't know what was going to happen. It was next to my woodshed and it all caught on fire somehow. I did not see that coming.
There was no warning label on the trees when they fell that said, don't stand near the woodshed.
How was I supposed to know trees were combustible?
I'm saying.
You know the trees are made of wood? That seems like something we could take advantage of here.
Trees are made of tree.
Plywood.
Right. I do want to touch on the predictive programming piece, though, because whether it's predictive programming or revelation of the method, I think even if we're using it as entertainment or enjoyment or whatever, we have to appreciate the fact that it's desensitization. That seeing these scenarios over and over and over is reducing our emotional and intellectual reaction to them.
Yeah.
So if we hadn't seen it in the movie, 10 different times, then when we saw it in the news, we'd really, really be up in arms. But because we've seen it so many times, like this is just what happens psychologically. We're like, I know this is bad, but you're not enraged by it. You're not moved to do something about it. You just don't like the idea because you saw it in the movie. And I think any of us that partakes in films and stuff, we have to appreciate that that's what's happening when we engage the content, is we are being desensitized, whether we like it or not.
Could you imagine the outcome of a blight wiping out all corn on Earth? It doesn't really matter. Corn wasn't that good. I'll just have some milk duds at the cinemas next time I'm there. I don't need
There's a book.
My corn syrup anyway. That's going to bother me. You got no more corn, like nothing sweet no more. Like, this is terrible.
You didn't even know that you could eat it as a vegetable. You just know that that's where the syrup
dang
comes
right.
from.
I didn't know it was a vegetable at all. I knew it was contained in pop, and it was a syrup. And I'm gonna tell you how I know it's contained in pop, because there's popcorn. So I knew corn and pop went together. And praise the Lord for that one. Right? Then they made it sweet, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. I love corn. Then it got on the cob, and I was like, I don't know what this genetically modified thing is. I don't trust this.
There's a book that came out, Christopher, a couple of years back from an author that I'm absolutely loving, Jacques Solol. It's called The Humiliation of the Word. But he was even talking about back then, it was kind of annoying even to him when they were making the original All Is Quiet on the Western Front. He said it's bad because you're putting that out there and it makes people desensitized to the horrors of war. And I was going, dude, this was like back in the 70s. What the hell are you talking about? And now I'm seeing what's going on. And I'm like, I don't think you were crazy. And the more I'm reading this, the more this is making a lot of sense.
Right. Exactly.
This whole conversation has gone back and forth, around in circles, overlapping, over the hills and through the woods we go. Every single possible thing that we could possibly talk about in the realm of science fiction, conspiracy, theological impact, we've tried to cover as best as we can. And that's like that really emphasizes how interconnected and broad this subject is. We could have gone for another 2 hours on this quite easily, but I think if we go any further, we're just going to be rehashing the same information. Well, let's leave the listeners with a little bit to dwell on. Maybe they can go and do their own research as well. Just from me on my closing points, definitely look into Palantir's connection with a lot of bioscience divisions and what they've got planned with a lot of three-letter agencies around the world. Have a look into Pivot and their so-called proven technology with microbes. That'll be something probably to keep an eye on over the next decade or so. Depends on how long we last. We don't know because we're introducing unknown elements into our world. Gentlemen, thank you for this conversation. I've been hanging out for this one. I think it's a good conversation to have in light of recent events in the world that have happened in the last couple of hours. I think everyone's going to be talking about that and missing like the most important things. They're going to be micromanaging and siloing their information on global conflicts instead of what's on their dinner plate. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Drew. It was great to be here.
Great. Yes.
Christopher, Jason, closing words, thoughts, and then tell the listeners where we find your fantastic work.
Closing words and thoughts, like is terrifying as some of this stuff may be, none of it catches God by surprise. All of his promises, all of his provision is exactly the same as it was when you thought that the world was safe and everything was going to be fine and you could trust the system and rely on your 401k and all of that. Like, none of this changes our relationship with God. If anything, it should propel us closer to him because he's the only one that can be trusted. He's the only source of provision, and his word is the only proper way to assess the world that we live in. So keep your eyes open, pray for your food, and trust in Jesus Christ. Those things are never going to change.
I love that.
Thank you.
It's good. I think, Drew, the other thing you were talking about, where they can find our stuff. Yeah. For people that are interested, you can head over to orppodcast.com. We're also on all the social media. Well, I should say Facebook and Instagram. Same handle at ORP Podcast. And, or you can drop us a line at let's talk at orppodcast.com. But we've got a lot of great stuff that we're working on this year. Right now, what's really hot is we're going through and doing satanic holidays, remapping those out and do a complete reboot of our original series. So it's got some really spicy things. I found out that titty balls and Mardi Gras are apparently a Christian celebration. I got really excited. And then Christopher really did the research and was like, no, the world looks at it like it's a Christian holiday. It is not at all. So I had to put my beads away. It was terrible. It's a very, very upsetting day for me. But no, we're going through this whole year and knocking out all of these holidays, which is going to be really cool. We're also working on a year-long series called Illuminati Power Centers, where we look at some of the big nodes within the satanic control matrix, particularly set up by the Illuminati and various sects of it that are designed to be funneling centers for the seething powers of Lucifer into society in order to help set up the necessary framework for the return of the Antichrist. So it's really, really wild stuff that we didn't think was connected, that we're seeing connections on. Really great stuff. And then we've got things sprinkled in throughout the whole year. It's going to be really fire, especially with some of the guests we got coming on. But as a wrap-up thought for me, I would say anybody that's interested in this, start looking into some of the things that Celeste Solom has done on her website with synthetic biology. Stuff is really good to get into and to really get a grasp on what is happening behind the scenes and some of the intentionality of the parasitic elite and what they want to do. But as Christopher said, getting the information is important. Placing your hope in the author of hope, Jesus Christ, is paramount. Don't allow this stuff to make you afraid. Amen. Use it as ammunition to confront the spiritual forces, to be wise, to prepare, to lead your family the right way, and to walk your life in the right possible way, but not to induce fear, because these spiritual entities feed on that, and that's not what you want to do. You really want to actually walk with your Creator and find that narrow pathway that takes you through all of this stuff without becoming a victim by it. I think it's totally important. But Drew, man, thanks so much for having us on here, man. It's been great to come back and chop it up with you and Brandon. I have missed this personally. I get a little bit of it with Christopher, who's always like smashing my brain in with stuff. So now I got to smash a different direction. It's good.
Anytime, brother. Welcome back at any stage, of course. Brandon, over to you. Final thoughts, words?
Yeah, pretty much just a hybrid of what both gentlemen have said. Is just remember that God is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the bread of life. And in the occult, that star of Remphan that you see from the juice box people, so without hidden censors, I chuckle because I think a lot of times people keep focusing on ethnicities when we are against ideologies, and basically all of that comes together is saying I have control of all the elements. I don't need you, God. I am divine on my own. That is essence of what Jason was saying earlier. That is what Satan tries to do. He cannot create. He can mimic, he can mock, he can delude, but he cannot create. Hence the significance of him trying to kill Christ. If I kill God's word, I win. That is how the creator made everything. So if I kill that, because he didn't kill God, but if I kill that one aspect of God, I cut out the tongue, I win. And it comes back as the way, the truth, and the life. You can't put God's word down in a corner, baby. It comes back. If you guys want to find me, it is the Mana Daily Podcast, Spotify, Rumble, YouTube, and if you can, and if you're able, on Patreon. Getting a lot of people who follow on Patreon, not so many who support, but I'm serious, folks. $3 a month, that's like $1.20 per week. You can't beat those prices at $60 for the entire year. So if you could, I'd appreciate if you guys could consider that, because it's getting a little bit tight over here. And without any further ado, thank you, Drew, for having us all on this panel. It was a wonderful discussion.
No, thank you. And Jason, I'm going to be a little bit selfish here. I've missed your voice. I've missed your face. Can you please close the show out in a prayer, brother?
Absolutely, man. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for everything that you've done for us and providing for us, providing a space for us to reconnect with you, providing for our salvation, providing for our eventual taking out of this world, and being able to be in a creation that you have recreated without the effects of sin and death. We thank you for that. But in the meantime, as we are called to this dystopian rock to exist, we ask that you will give us the wisdom and the know-how on how to execute in the dimensional plane of existence in which you have placed us, that we will be bastions for your kingdom of righteousness, and we will be willing to take the fight to our enemy and not back down. We thank you for all of this, Lord, for everyone who is listening to this that are different places of spiritual development, for those that hear this and are galvanized to fight. We thank you that you will continue to stir up that fighter and warrior spirit in them. For those that may have heard this and are a little worried about it, we ask that you will give them peace. And for those that hear this and may be skeptical, we ask that you encourage them to do their own research and come to their own conclusions. But in all things, we thank you for everything that you are doing to redeem us unto yourself. And we ask that you will help us to maintain that good fight until such day as we are called home to you. In Yeshua Christ Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
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 On that note, folks, we'll catch you all next time.